You had me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Playing the cello. Hi, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday. Time for Cello Chat. I am thrilled to have with me this week Dr. Cora Swenson Lee. Cora, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing quite well myself. It's finally starting to look a bit more like spring.
Yes, down here as well, and we're wrapping up classes, so the end of the semester is always an exciting time.
Exciting is a great word for it. There's still a mountain of stuff to be done, but the end is near one way or the other.
Yes.
Well, can you tell our viewers a bit about your musical background?
Sure. So I'm currently the instructional assistant professor of cello at Illinois State University. Before that, I studied at the Eastman School of Music, but I started playing cello at a very young age. I think I just passed my 30-year first lesson anniversary on Mozart's birthday. That's how I always keep track of it. And yeah, like a lot of children, I saw Yo-Yo Ma play on television, Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street, and I just said, Dad, that's what I want to do. And they were like, okay, 6 months of begging later, and I finally got my first cello. So it's been a long, a part of my life as long as I can remember, really. Yeah.
And then where'd you go from there?
So I did, I played through high school, of course, was very fortunate in high school to study with Mark Johnson of the Vermeer String Quartet. And he set me up really well for my future. So I did my undergraduate work at the Eastman School of Music with Alan Harris, went off to Boston and studied with Mark Johnson. Again, he had relocated at that point at Boston University. Did some freelancing and ultimately decided to go back for my doctorate. And I went back to Eastman and back to Alan Harris because I just knew there was more to get from studying with him. So
tremendous. And how did you get from there to your current position?
I had a couple of adjunct positions when I was during my doctorate and finishing up my doctorate. And I just got lucky early pandemic, actually, that there was an opening here at ISU. The previous cello professor had moved into an interim director position. So there was an opening and I applied for it. And, I saw it as an opportunity to move home because I grew up in Illinois originally. So it was really, I was really grateful for that. And fortunately for me, it's just worked out more permanently. So
excellent. Outstanding. Yeah. So I have to mention the Vermeer Quartet is one of those where if I want to listen to a variety of interpretations of any given piece, they're one of the few that's always on my must hit, because sometimes you get a sampling of a variety of things, but I always have to hear the Vermeer approach to a given.
Yes, they were really special, weren't they?
Yeah. And then, of course, Alan Harris, I never got to study with him, but his reputation is enormous as well in terms of his contributions to cello pedagogy.
Yeah.
Do you have some, I know it can be very hard to summarize what you learn over years, but some general principles or thoughts about the biggest takeaways from both of the teachers?
Absolutely. They were very similar in philosophy, I think, although their methods were different. Mark Johnson, he just had the world's sharpest ears. I feel like, he could hear anything. And he was very musically driven. Not that Alan Harris wasn't. He definitely fostered the musician in every student, but with him, it was very much a marriage of technique and musicianship, that the two are not some separate entities that you work and then put together at the end, that they're inherently two sides of the same coin. And so in studying with Alan, there was a lot of emphasis on the technique because the technique was the means to that musical end. And so every motion that I make at the instrument has a musical outcome in mind, even if it seems like I'm doing it for technical purposes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would say that that's the kind of overarching philosophy that I learned from both of them, but particularly from Alan Harris.
Excellent. Yeah, it is interesting how it seems a lot of youngsters' instincts are, okay, first I want to learn the notes and the rhythms, and it can be very dry and mechanical. And then, okay, now musicality, right? It's kind of too, I mean, even if it's not too late, it's so much harder to then try to go back and.
Right. Because you have to rework every motion you've practiced for months, right, at the instrument. And so if you just start out with some sort of musical vision at the outset, then all of the technical practice is more useful.
Absolutely. Well, and this discussion even so far may immediately relate to some of your favorite go-tos as far as helping to motivate students to want to practice. Because, I mean, certainly, let's face it, one of the things that is a great motivator is when you feel like you are accomplishing a lot in the practice room and you know why you're practicing and what you're trying to accomplish. But then we also know there's just an awful lot of students who need additional help from the teacher to get into a routine of practicing regularly, practicing more often, practicing even on the days that maybe they really aren't as motivated. What are some of your favorite approaches to this issue?
Yeah, I think a lot of it starts with just making sure that my students are involved in choosing their repertoire, because if they're invested in the project, then they're more likely to, put up with the grind. So I'm not one of those teachers that's like, you absolutely are going to do this. I don't care how much you hate it. Usually I can get them to play what I want them to eventually anyway. But we might take a detour through something that they're more excited about. Or have a deal like, well, okay, you can play that if you also play this, right? And so I think that that's a big part of it. And I personally, I'm the kind of person that needs a goal at the end, and so I do try to provide that for my students as well. It's not just learning it to learn it, trying to make sure that they have some performance opportunity on the horizon so that there's a reason to continue working forward and not just get bogged down. But in terms of, the day-to-day stuff, every student is different, and what kind of makes them tick. And I do spend a lot of time trying to figure that out. But I think, giving them, I'll just give them like a list of things. And I'm like, if you're having a rough day and you don't know what to do, pick one off the sheets. Or one of my students has like an app, that does like a wheel, like you spin it and whatever it lands on is what you have to do, like that kind of thing,
Sure.
just like you have to do something. I'll give them, say like, if you're having a day where your brain isn't in it, like these are the things you can still accomplish. But I think a lot of it comes back to also the philosophy that I've inherited from my teachers, which is that you don't have to practicing doesn't have to be dry. Practicing can be an exploration. And so a lot of what I try to do is kind of, tie the mind and body together. Like if it feels good, they're going to want to do it more. And so I spend a lot of my time working with students on ways that they can get the musical effect that they want in the most comfortable way. And very often it leaves them excited to go practice, right? Because they're like, oh, this feels good. I can do this. If they've had that sense of accomplishment, that sense of competence, then they're much more likely to continue to pursue that on their own. So I guess those are just a couple of ideas.
I like that. I like that a lot. And in a way, both that it physically feels good and mentally feels good, in terms of it does not have to be dry. Because for some students, it's more about the the brain immediately daydreaming or just,
Right.
oh, how long do we have to do this?
Yeah. Well, and I admit that I've sometimes been that student, right? Like, I mean, I love cello playing, obviously from a young age, it's been my whole life, but some days it still does feel like a job, and sometimes you just have to find ways to get the work done, even if it doesn't feel really inspiring that day. And so another thing we talk about a lot is how do you integrate this into your daily life? Like, what rhythms feel natural to you, and can you find those pockets of the day when you have the most energy? Unfortunately for me, like I get these bursts of creative energy at like 11 o'clock at night, which is really inconvenient if you're trying to practice. Yeah, so I get these bursts of energy late at night, and first I thought like, I'm just never going to be able to practice earlier in the day. That's just the time of day that my body wants to practice, or my brain wants to practice. And then I realized it's because at that point in the day, like my brain has wound down enough from other things that I have space for that creative activity. And so, I try to get creative with myself about like, how can I carve out mental space, in other times of the day that are maybe more convenient for my practice. So that I can have that kind of productivity. And so just kind of knowing what it is that helps each person's brain function optimally for practice, or, the rhythms of their lives, how do you integrate it so that it doesn't feel like it's tacked on as a chore?
I like that. That's something that has been, I think, not as much explored in this series necessarily. So, for example, if one reads a book on practicing, sometimes they'll talk about finding a routine in a particular time of day. But as far as you're talking some now about also the why of that time of day, because for some people, they love to just do it first thing. But if somebody else is already distracted by that day's events, and you're the whole time you're having to work to focus on your music because you need to get through all these other things,
right.
Then even if, so that may mean one of two things, either late at night, like what you're talking about, or just realizing that, no, it's that I have to not feel either pressured time-wise or by whatever's coming next, so that you have that feeling of imagination and creativity. And
right.
I think that's a very good point. Are you at all familiar with the book? I may botch the title, but it's about what we learn from dreams, or why we dream, why we sleep. Shoot.
No, I don't think so. It's not ringing any bells. I probably would remember it if I had read it.
I would have done my homework better if I knew that it was the conversation was going to lead this way. But it's the sort of thing too, where in terms of the 24-hour cycle of understanding the process of, okay, because building in a sense of, all right, here's what I want to accomplish today, and here's how I want to accomplish it, and then you do it, and then there's kind of the brain also processes it afterwards, and it's great if that whole thing can feel like it is intentional rather than just kind of catch as catch can.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure as most teachers probably do, talk about goal setting and having an agenda for your practice. And that works for a lot of students. It doesn't work for every student. And, something I've been really interested in recently is understanding, mental health of my students and the way that self-talk affects how we function. And so, a lot of this, like, well, if you're not practicing this way, then you're lazy, or if you don't want to practice, then you're, a bad musician, that kind of stuff that, it was so common for so long, and I think it still is in some ways, just trying to undo those thought patterns and say like, okay, I'm not lazy, I just function this way, and honoring that, and then being able to streamline your practice into your life, the way that you are comfortable living.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Another thing I want to ask you about for sure is your ability to, you sound to me every bit as comfortable playing on baroque cello as on modern cello. on your website, for example, to go from hearing you play the Britten Sonata, which is a great sonata, I think it ought to be played more often, then to the Trio Speranza piece where you're just playing these, there are a number of things that are considerably different in one's approach to playing. And you have the very, very clear ornaments, for example. It's almost like two different players. So do you proactively do anything to kind of keep up both styles, or are you just naturally drawn to both and spend time practicing both equally?
Well, I will say that I started playing Baroque cello very young. I was about 10, and my father was a lute player. So it does feel kind of like a native language to me in a way that it probably wouldn't for other people. Like, I grew up surrounded in the historically informed performance movement. My earliest musical memories are of listening to Monteverdi. So that just feels very natural to me. I have, of course, also done quite a bit of study on it, and I did take Baroque cello lessons when I was a preteen. With John Mark Rosendahl. So if, anyone out here knows John Mark, he's great. So I studied it from a young age, and I continued to play Baroque cello all through my collegiate and graduate studies. And I was very fortunate to work with Paul Odette and Crystal Thielman at Eastman, and with Sarah Freiberg in Boston and Boston Baroque. And so it's just been a big part of my life. Again, as long as I can remember. And I think what's interesting, I've had multiple people remark to me, watching me play modern cello, "Oh, it's interesting, you hold it so much like a Baroque cello." Because I have a very low cello setup. I don't hold it high up on my chest. I hold it rather low, and it feels like it's, being enveloped by my body in the same way that a Baroque cello is. And a lot of my bow technique transfers really beautifully from one to the next. So when I sit down and play, I guess they don't feel like very different instruments. Even though, of course, they are. The bow functions differently on gut strings than it does on steel. And they have different tendencies as well, the Baroque and modern bows, where they want to bounce or not bounce, and the decay and things like that. But they don't feel that different to me in terms of the way that I physically interact with the instrument. And so I would say I spend most of my time on modern cello practicing, and everything that I do on that cello makes me a better Baroque cellist. Because the style is so much a part of my being, and then the technique from the modern cello, I think, just makes me very comfortable on the Baroque instrument.
All right. Well, now, would you tell a bit about, I want to ask you both about the Popper Day and about the Eastman Cello Institute.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Eastman Cello Institute is coming up first. That's a summer program that I coordinate, obviously, through the Eastman School of Music. I was very fortunate that when it was founded in, 2016, so when we started working on it, Alan Harris was the kind of engine behind it, and he brought me on board right away and said, "Hey, I really want to start this program." And I was his TA at the time, and he said, "You're going to do it." He's like, "I want it to happen, and you're going to be, the person organizing it." So I was really lucky to be a part of establishing this program. And so at the time, he basically asked me, if you had, your dream cello program as a high school, early college student, what would it be? And I was like, all cello all the time. I want daily technique classes. I want daily performance classes. I want to do cello ensembles. I want to, so that's what we did. We have 3 weeks of all the cello things you can possibly do in that span of time. And it's really amazing to see how much growth and how much progress students can make in 3 weeks of really immersive experience. I mean, it is intense in terms of there's a huge volume of information, coming at students every day. But I mean, so is music school, right? If you go to conservatory, that's pretty much what you're going to get. So in a lot of ways, minus the theory and history classes, you're getting the Eastman experience when you attend. And what the other thing that I think is very cool about the program is that we have a team of faculty that are so philosophically aligned. I mean, it began with Alan Harris and myself and Kathleen Kemp, who is the assistant principal cellist of Rochester Philharmonic. Mm. She was another very important mentor in my life when I was in college. Alan Harris has since retired, and so we now have Dan Ketter from Missouri State University and Lisa Caravan, who's on the faculty at Eastman in the music and teaching and learning department. And all of us worked with Alan at Harris at some point in our lives and studies. And so we're individual people, but we come from the same background and the same philosophy. And so students will have a lesson with 3 different faculty in 1 week, and they're just getting different, perspectives at the same problem. It just reinforces what we're talking about, and it allows for this really deep, experience, a deep understanding of the material that they're dealing with. So that's something that I'm really proud of in that program. And as far as Popper Day goes, I inherited Popper Day from my predecessor at Illinois State, Adriana Ransom. And so I had one virtual Popper Day and one proper Popper Day, and it was very fun. This year, the plan this coming year is to move Popper Day to the spring. Normally it's been a fall activity, but we're going to balance it out with a Bachtoberfest in the fall. So we're going to try to bookend the year with two fun cello days. But the idea is that, we're trying to get students from Illinois and from around the Midwest to come check out ISU, hang out with my cellists. We do a technique class, we do cello ensembles, master classes, and it's just a really fun day of getting to celebrate what's so awesome about the cello. So those are a couple events coming up at ISU next year.
I love that. Well, it's funny, some of our past cello days, cello clinics at Whitewater, we have had some where the theme has been Bach and Popper. And so now you're going to have the Bachtoberfest and the Popper. And do one in fall and one in spring. I love it. Because, it's both the fact that the unaccompanied playing is very, I think it's, for one thing, it's very satisfying. For another, it's very versatile because you don't have to compare anybody else's calendar but your own. And for another thing, the stuff that we can learn from Bach and what we can learn from Popper, it's just kind of a portion of our repertoire that you'd be kind of not doing yourself a favor by ignoring that important repertoire.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, what about upcoming performances or other projects? For example, after the Eastman Cello Institute in the summer, what else do you have on your plate?
Well, right before the Eastman Cello Institute, I'm slated to go to Panama to perform at a festival down there with my colleague from ISU, a sonata by Roque Cordero, who was a composer previously based at Illinois State. And he was originally from Panama. So that's an exciting project in the works, COVID permitting, of course. And on the other end of the Eastman Cello Institute, ISU is playing host this summer to, I'm going to get the order of these words wrong because I'm not involved in the planning of it, but it's the North American Society of British Musicologists or something like that. That they're hosting their conference at Illinois State this summer, and I'm going to be performing hopefully a movement of the Britten Sonata as well as Imogen Holst's Fall of the Leaf at the opening concert for that. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And then summer goes by very quickly when you spend a month of it on one camp. So all of July basically is the Cello Institute for me. And then, getting ready for the fall semester. We host a string project camp every year at Illinois State. So it's kids from the community that come in, and they're primarily taught by our collegiate students. And I am a faculty supervisor for that. So that's how I'm going to end up my summer before the fall semester starts.
Very nice. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful just hearing your perspective on these various things and what you've been up to and what you are up to, and hopefully will be exactly what people need for an inspired weekend of practicing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to chat with you.
All right. Well, everybody else, now you can get out those cellos and start practicing all weekend, and we'll see you this time next Friday. Take care.